We are following the impacts of flooding across northern Michigan tonight. Now, high water has pushed huge chunks of ice onto the shores around some inland lakes.
It's unpredictable for those living by bodies of water. In late Sunday afternoon, homeowners by the Aloha State Park on Sheboygan County's Mullet Lake had to battle those chunks of ice.
It only took 4 minutes. 4 minutes for everything to change. Along the quiet shoreline of Mullet Lake in northern Michigan, what looked like a calm late afternoon suddenly turned into something no one was prepared for. There were no warning sirens, no dramatic storm surge, just wind and ice. Massive chunks of lake ice, driven by powerful gusts, began to move slow at first, then violently. Within moments, they slammed into the shore, tearing through anything in their path. A gazebo shattered, a wooden deck ripped from its foundation. A home that had stood for over 60 years was suddenly under threat. Residents described the sound as something unforgettable, like endless glass breaking, echoing across the water. And the most terrifying part? There was nothing they could do to stop it. This wasn't just flooding. This wasn't just ice. It was a force of nature moving faster than anyone could react. And what's happening here might only be the beginning. Stay updated with the latest extreme weather events, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss what comes next. Across northern Michigan, the situation is unfolding far beyond a single shoreline. Water levels have been steadily rising around key areas like Lake Mitchell and Lake Cadillac, spilling into nearby low-lying neighborhoods. What was once dry ground is now saturated, unstable, and in many places, completely underwater. Roads that people use every day are no longer passable. Parks, boat launches, and entire sections of the waterfront have been forced to shut down. But it's not just the water. Strong winds sweeping across these lakes are turning the surface into a moving force, pushing ice toward the shore with relentless pressure. Along Mullet Lake, that pressure builds until something gives, and when it does, the result is sudden and violent. Ice doesn't drift in quietly. It surges forward, grinding, cracking, and piling up against anything in its path. Homes near the shoreline are taking the full impact. Wooden structures splinter under the weight. Outdoor spaces, decks, docks, small buildings are the first to go. And all of it happens in moments, not hours. For residents, there's no time to react. Just the sound of wind rising, ice shifting, and then impact. This is what flooding looks like when it's combined with something far less predictable movement. What makes this situation more dangerous is how quickly it spreads. It's no longer isolated to one home or one stretch of shoreline. Across multiple areas in northern Michigan, the same pattern is repeating: rising water, intensifying winds, and shifting ice combining into something far more destructive than any single element on its own. In some neighborhoods, residents are already preparing for the worst. Evacuation plans are being discussed. Essential belongings are being moved higher, away from ground level. People are watching the shoreline closely, not knowing if the next surge of ice will stop at the edge or continue straight into their homes. And the sounds don't stop. Cracking, grinding, a constant, sharp noise that many describe as glass shattering over and over again. It echoes across the lake, especially as the wind begins to pick up again. Each gust increases the pressure, pushing more ice forward, inch by inch, until it suddenly gives way. There's a growing sense that control is slipping. Because unlike rising water, which can sometimes be predicted, this movement is erratic. It shifts direction. It accelerates without warning. And once it starts, it doesn't slow down easily. What began as flooding is now something more complex. A chain reaction of natural forces building, overlapping, and pushing the situation closer to a point where small damage can quickly turn into something much larger. What's happening in northern Michigan is no longer being treated as a localized incident. It has officially escalated into a broader emergency. In the city of Cadillac, a state of emergency remains in place as officials work to manage the ongoing flooding. The primary sources are clear. Rising water levels from Lake Mitchell, Lake Cadillac, and surrounding low-lying areas are feeding directly into the city's infrastructure. As water continues to spread, the pressure on roads, drainage systems, and public spaces is increasing by the hour. Several major roads have already been shut down, including parts of Chestnut Street, North Boulevard, and Lakeshore Drive. These aren't minor routes, they are critical connections used daily by residents. With closures in place, movement across the city has become more limited and unpredictable. Public areas have also been affected. Parks, boat launches, and the Clam River Greenway have all been closed as a precaution, with officials urging residents to stay away from flooded zones. The message is consistent. Conditions can change rapidly, and what appears manageable one moment can become dangerous the next. Crews are actively monitoring water levels, but even with constant updates, there is no immediate resolution. The system is still under stress. And as long as water continues to flow in from multiple sources, the risk remains active, shifting from inconvenience to something far more serious. As floodwaters continue to rise, the pressure is no longer just on homes and roads, it's now hitting critical infrastructure. On the west side of Cadillac, a sanitary sewer lift station, an essential part of the city's wastewater system, has been overwhelmed. This facility is designed to move wastewater safely through the network. But when floodwaters from nearby lakes and low-lying areas breached its protective barriers, the system was pushed beyond its limits. And when a system like this begins to fail, the consequences escalate quickly. Officials warned of a serious risk: wastewater backing up into residential areas, inside homes, through drains, through pipes never meant to handle reverse flow. It's not just flooding anymore, it becomes a sanitation crisis. Crews have been working around the clock, building temporary barriers, reinforcing weak points, and pumping out water to regain control. So far, one pump has been brought back online, but that doesn't mean the danger has passed. The entire system is still under significant strain. Every additional inch of water feeding into the network increases the pressure. Every delay raises the risk of further failure. And unlike visible damage on the surface, this threat is harder to see, but potentially far more disruptive. Because when infrastructure begins to break down during a flood, recovery becomes more complex, and the margin for error becomes almost non-existent. Behind every flooded street and damaged structure, there are people trying to hold things together. In neighborhoods across northern Michigan, the situation has become deeply personal. Homes that once felt stable now sit surrounded by water, with uncertainty creeping in hour by hour. For many residents, this isn't just about property, it's about safety, memories, and a sense of control that is quickly slipping away. Some families have already begun preparing to leave, not because they want to, but because they have to be ready. Evacuation plans are discussed quietly, often while watching the shoreline or checking water levels again and again. The fear isn't always visible, but it's there in every decision, every packed bag, every glance outside. And then there's the emotional weight. One resident described the situation with a sense of helplessness, saying that if it were something within human control, it would be easier to accept. But this isn't something you can fix with effort alone. It's nature, moving on its own terms. For others, it's the unpredictability that hits the hardest. The fact that everything can change in minutes. That a calm moment doesn't mean safety, it might just be a pause. Because when you're living through it, this isn't just a news story. It's your home, your street, your reality shifting in ways you can't fully control. As conditions worsen, one thing becomes clear: people are not facing this alone. Across northern Michigan, communities are mobilizing quickly, turning concern into action. In Cadillac, city officials have begun providing free sand at public works locations, giving residents a basic but critical resource to help protect their homes. It's a simple measure, but in situations like this, even small barriers can make a meaningful difference. But the real momentum is coming from the people themselves. Volunteers have stepped in, organizing efforts to fill and distribute sandbags across affected areas. In just a single day, thousands of sandbags were filled, tied, and delivered to neighborhoods at risk. The response was fast, coordinated, and driven by a shared understanding everyone is vulnerable and every hour counts. Social media posts, calling for help, were met with immediate action. People showed up, not because they were told to, but because they understood what was at stake. Supplies were brought in. Food was delivered to those working long hours. Teams formed naturally, each person taking on a role, filling, carrying, stacking. It wasn't organized in a traditional sense, but it worked. In the middle of rising water and growing uncertainty, this kind of response creates something rare: stability. Because while nature continues to push forward, the community is pushing back. Not with certainty of control, but with determination to hold the line for as long as possible. In the middle of a fast-moving crisis, speed becomes everything. And when it comes to protecting homes from rising water, sandbags are still one of the most reliable defenses. But the traditional way of filling them by hand, one shovel at a time, quickly becomes a limitation when demand surges. That's where a simple but effective innovation is making a difference. In Charlevoix County, a locally developed device known as a sandbag filler is helping communities dramatically increase their response capacity. The design is straightforward, lightweight, portable, and easy to use, but its impact is significant. With manual labor, one person might manage 25 to 30 sandbags per hour under ideal conditions. But with this system, 2 people can produce close to 100 or more in the same amount of time and sustain that pace longer without exhaustion. It doesn't rely on complex machinery. There are no moving parts to maintain. And most importantly, it doesn't require specialized training. Volunteers can learn to use it in minutes. That simplicity turns it into what responders describe as a force multiplier. Because in a situation where time is limited and water keeps rising, the ability to scale effort quickly can change outcomes. Not by stopping the flood, but by giving people a better chance to keep it out. As floodwaters continue to spread, the disruption is reaching far beyond neighborhoods and into the wider region. In Emmett County, Pellston Regional Airport remains grounded. Runways and taxiways are still covered with moving water, making operations unsafe. Flights have been suspended, and officials are now waiting for conditions to improve before reassessing. It's a reminder that flooding doesn't just stay local, it affects transportation, logistics, and the flow of daily life. Elsewhere, the impact is visible in more subtle, but equally important ways. Near Traverse City, a large brown plume has formed where the Boardman River meets the bay. It's not pollution in the traditional sense, but a surge of mud, debris, and sediment carried downstream by the floodwaters. Experts say it's temporary, but it highlights how much material is being displaced as water moves through the system. And that movement carries risk. Debris-filled currents are making rivers and shorelines dangerous. Officials are warning residents to stay away from the water, avoid riverbanks, and respect closures. What may look calm on the surface can shift quickly beneath. Because at this scale, flooding isn't just about water levels. It's about everything the water picks up and where it carries it next. There are now early signs that conditions may be starting to shift, but not enough to call it a recovery. In some areas, water levels have begun to slowly recede. Officials report slight drops near key monitoring points, and a few previously closed roads, like parts of South Airport Road, have reopened to traffic. It's a small, but important step toward restoring normal movement. Evacuation concerns near certain dams have also eased as water levels trend downward. For residents who had been preparing for the worst, that change offers a moment of relief. But the situation remains fragile. Emergency crews are still actively monitoring rivers, dams, and low-lying areas. Debris continues to move through waterways, and strong currents remain a hidden danger. Infrastructure that has already been strained is not fully stabilized, and even a minor shift in conditions could reverse progress. Officials are urging caution, slow down on the roads, avoid risky areas, and stay alert. Because, while the water may be pulling back in some places, the system as a whole hasn't fully reset. And in situations like this, what looks like improvement can sometimes be just a pause before the next surge. What's unfolding in northern Michigan reveals something important. This isn't just a flooding event. It's the result of multiple forces converging at the same time. Rising water from surrounding lakes, strong winds pushing across open surfaces, massive sheets of ice breaking loose and moving with pressure, and beneath it all, infrastructure systems not designed to handle this level of combined stress. Individually, each factor can be managed, but together they create something far less predictable. A situation where timing matters more than scale, where a few minutes can determine the difference between minor damage and total loss, and where control becomes limited, even with preparation. It highlights a critical reality. Modern communities are built on systems that work under expected conditions. When those conditions shift, even slightly, the margin for error disappears quickly. And the challenge isn't just responding in the moment. It's understanding how these overlapping risks can reshape what we think of as normal in the future. What's happening in northern Michigan is a reminder of how quickly conditions can shift and how little time there is to react when they do. From rising water to moving ice, from overwhelmed systems to entire communities under pressure, this is a situation still unfolding in real time. And while some areas are beginning to see slight improvement, the overall risk has not fully passed. Moments like this don't just test infrastructure, they test awareness, preparation, and response. Stay updated on major weather events and follow the channel to keep track of what happens next. Because the next shift may not come with a warning.